More than 100 prisoners at the Guantanamo camp have been on a hunger strike for 5 weeks now in a desperate attempt to draw attention to their plight. The strike was launched in protest against the confiscation of letters and rough handling of their Korans. Their lawyers and human rights activists sounding the alert over their critical condition, but U.S. military officials claim no one's in danger. RT's also tried to contact Guantanamo authorities, but has no response so far. RT's Ganesh Shikian has more.
Guantanamo detainees have been on a hunger strike for more than a month now. The facility, which is now on strike, holds most of the inmates there, 130 people out of 166, the total number of prisoners at Guantanamo. The detainees, through their lawyers, say most of them are taking part in this. We cannot verify exactly how many. We left a message with Robert Duran, the media person for Guantanamo. Very much hope he will get back to us. The attorneys for the detainees are saying their health is deteriorating. We spoke with Pardis Kabrai. Her client there says he lost 20 pounds since the beginning of the strike at the beginning of February. Pardis said she and a number of other attorneys had sent a letter with their questions to the authorities at Guantanamo, copying the Justice Department. She said they hadn't responded yet.
At this point, the strike is more than 30 days old. And by day 45, we understand from medical experts, there are serious health repercussions that start happening. Things like loss of hearing, potential blindness, and in a couple of weeks, worse than that, ultimately, the potential is there for death as well if hunger strikes continue for weeks. We've received no response to that letter so far.
Parties also said they want a response from the authorities more meaningful than the few remarks by the prison spokesperson in the media. Robert Duran, I mentioned him earlier, responded to the allegations that the prisoners' copies of the Quran had been mistreated, and that's what presumably triggered the strike. He said it was a routine search for contraband and, quote, the Quran is treated with the utmost respect, end of quote. It may very well be so. From the conversations that we had with the lawyers, I got a sense that this act of desperation is not just about the Quran. The lawyers are saying that these detainees desperately want to get the word out about the situation that they're in, not formally accused of anything, not knowing whether they're ever going to see their day in court, detained indefinitely. The UN says holding detainees indefinitely at Guantanamo Bay amounts to torture. 4 years ago, President Obama signed an executive order to stop torture there. But according to the UN, indefinite detention itself is also a form of torture. It's hard to imagine the degree of desperation among the inmates there. Half of them, 86 to be precise, are sitting there with papers from the US government which clear them for release, and yet they're still there. Human rights organizations report hundreds of suicide attempts. At least 7 of them were successful. A detainee named Adnan Latif took his own life last September. He was cleared for release by both Bush and Obama administrations, and yet never released. He had spent 11 years at Guantanamo. That gives some idea about the level of hopelessness caused by indefinite detention. So it's somewhat obvious that through this hunger strike, the detainees want to make themselves heard. And it's not easy. We're one of very few channels that covers this story. There's a desire to kind of forget about Guantanamo. It's very much reflected in the mainstream media here and in the scarce reporting that we have seen on the issue. In Washington, I'm Ganesh Shikian.
Lawyers of Guantanamo prisoners have sent a letter to U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel urging him to end the mass strike. One of those attorneys, Eric Montalvo, says running the facility and spending millions doing so is absurd, with those cleared of all charges by the administration still being held for no reason.
There are people in Guantanamo Bay right now that have been determined by the Obama administration to be clear of any charges, but they languish down there because we have policies of no transport to certain countries like Yemen. It's really an abominable, humanitarian situation where you're depriving these people of life and liberty, and for no really valid basis. President Obama in his first term within 24 hours said, I'm going to close Guantanamo Bay because this doesn't need to exist. And yet we sit here how many years later and we talk about, all of the budget cuts and all of the concerns and the millions and millions and millions millions of dollars that we're spending upon this facility, the medical care, the transportation of personnel to and from, the upgrade of the facilities. It's just nonsensical. It makes absolutely no sense. And somebody needs to go down there, make some decisions, and clear that place out, because it has no purpose other than babysitting a bunch of adult people that have been cleared of any wrongdoing, and they just need to be, sent home.